All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. It's coffee break. It's
Mm-hmm.
so.
Sure is.
It sure
Sure
is.
is.
I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be here with truly one of my favorite people in the indie RPG scene. Just a truly wonderful person in general. I've got BLG
Thank
here.
you. Oh my
Brandon,
gosh.
would you mind introducing yourself to the fine folks at home before we just talk?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Brandon Leon-Gambetta. I am the designer behind Pasión de las Pasiones, which is a powered by the apocalypse game of telenovelas. And so it's, drama, betrayal, lies, romance. And it's been called the sexiest game on your shelf.
I believe that.
There was a while that it was making a little bit of a stir because of that.
Because it was too sexy?
Yeah, people going like, can I like if I buy this at a convention, can I like walk around carrying it?
Will they let me
Like
back on my
it does have
plane?
like sleeves like to cover it. And it's like this is on Subway ads. You're fine.
Right.
Um, I also am a podcaster. I was one of the GMs and players of Protean City Comics, which was one of the early Masks APs, and Stop Back and Roll, the one of the longest running design chat podcasts. If you ignore all of our off weeks that we've been having just all the time.
How
But
long has Stop Hack It Rolling on? Because you're right. Now that
it's
I think about it,
been
it's been on for a while.
it's been I think more than 8 years.
Wow.
Um, we recently hit an anniversary, and I should know this, but we didn't do an anniversary episode, which we sometimes do. I
Mm.
think because we are both sick of doing anniversary episodes, because we were like, every anniversary we'll do like a look back and like like what have we put out, what have we
Sure.
done, what have we talked about, and it's like, oh, we haven't put out any games, and
We don't
because
want to face that.
we love the design, not the publication,
Yeah.
and so
Getting it across the finish line is the hardest part, right? Like the design part is the fun part. Let me
exactly,
just play in the
exactly.
space of making shit up, and then like,
Yeah,
oh, you want me to make a
you,
thing? You want a thing?
like
Oh,
words in paragraph form. I can't
edited?
just like. What if instead I get on a phone call and explain it once, and someone like, guys, just record the phone call.
Can that just be the game? Can I
I
just do an audio note into my phone and put that on itch and be like, this is the game. Figure it out from what I'm gonna go take a walk for
yeah,
an hour and
and
ramble into my
it'll be
phone.
good. Yeah,
Wait, is this a thing? Could we do
this is.
this?
I mean, okay, so this is actually something I've thought about a lot. You could just get like transcription software.
Right.
Like there's free transcription software, and there's really nothing stopping you from sitting down, talking through your thing, and then like editing it. And then you
Yeah.
don't need to like type you're typing words in like you're editing, but like I don't like that seems like a thing. That seems and like then you could have the original recording as like an additional, side piece to it.
Right.
So if someone wants to like listen to you describe it instead, then they can. I think there is maybe
There's
something there.
something there. I mean,
Yeah.
Will and Aaron and Chatter are into the idea. So, I mean,
And that
there's
is
enough of
that
us.
is
That's critical
that is
mass for making this happen.
that is not just critical mass. That is like well supported
We need fools not
like
to do
like
this.
like people who know games really well are
Right.
saying like, yes, no, this is good.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Well, this is actually perfect timing because I'm going to be going on a 14-hour plane ride tonight. And so maybe
And you can
I
just
could
be the
just
worst
just
passenger,
just
the worst seatmate.
just don't mind me real quick. I know it's 12:30 in the morning, but I've got this idea. I gotta get it out of my head.
Yeah, and so then the little goblin guys. Yeah, no, no, I know you're sleeping.
Just I really got to get through this part at least. The core mechanic. If I don't have the core mechanic, I got nothing.
Actually, no, I think this will even work better if you just like turn your face towards me, because like then it feels like a conversation.
Do you mind if I just
uh,
kind of use you as like my student, as
my
if I'm
sounding
just
board, we're
talking to my
co-working.
student?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I
All right, this is perfect.
You had the moment of affection at the beginning. I need to make sure that I return that affection because you are absolutely one of my favorite game designers, and you'll want to I have such a great time chatting with you. I'm so glad to be on here. My wife pointed out to me a while ago that every single time I refer to you as my buddy Spencer.
Aww.
And there was one time that I didn't, and she was like, "Is like everything okay with you and Spencer?" I was like, "Oh yeah, Spencer just put out a new game," and she was like, "Did something happen? You guys okay?"
Bad game? Did he
put out
do
a game,
something?
and it's not good.
It's not good.
And so
I
he
don't
has
know if I
been
can be his friend
demoted.
anymore.
I can only be buddies with people that put out consistently good games.
Wow, what a delightful thing to hear.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's a thing that exists. That you are exclusively my buddy Spencer.
I love that. I mean, we're approaching Gen Con season. We're like 2 months out.
We are.
And that's Gen Con last year is when we finally got a chance to see each other in person, right? Because we'd always done the chats through online stuff, but that was really, really, like, I think that was the highlight of Gen Con. No, I love everybody that I met, but like sitting down and having breakfast with you multiple days, just like,
Yeah,
that was
fantastic. That was like I had there was it was a very special moment for me, like seeing Passion come up during the Ennies.
Yeah.
Like that's like a life moment that I will remember, being in that weird auditorium with the weird projector. And like second to that is like, and then I had awesome breakfast with my buddy Spencer. It's like I had an important moment for me that I was like, the first game about Latinidad to be nominated for an Annie and like be up on the screen, and then like I had really great breakfasts with Spencer.
We had some really yummy food and some funny stories,
good conversations.
Oh man, yeah. So I've been very much looking forward to actually getting a chance to sit down and do coffee break with you.
Likewise.
I feel like we've done coffee break together.
We have
in many ways.
This is the fourth coffee break that we've done together.
Yeah, probably.
Just the others weren't aired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The only other person who knows what went down on those is Mike Riemann.
Yes, yeah.
He's part of that coffee break triumvirate.
That was delightful. That was so much fun.
But yeah, this is for folks who are watching, this is the last coffee break for a little while because I'm going to be going on vacation for a month. As I alluded to, I'm going on a 14-hour plane ride tonight. So I'm so excited to just have Brandon here to be like the sending off party of sorts for coffee break.
I'm so glad to be, because I catch on VOD at least everything. I try to catch it live, but I've got a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And so my schedule is a little all over the place.
How dare you? So
yeah.
I see you drinking coffee, I assume?
Of course. Yes, of course.
Just before this, because I want to know if anybody else is aware of this, you were talking about a substance behind you, the peanut butter powder. Is there peanut butter powder in that coffee?
There is not peanut butter powder in the coffee.
Okay.
I have already had some peanut butter powder today.
You hit your quota of the powder.
Oh no. I will be going back. I will be going back to this 2-pound box of peanut butter powder.
So I feel like I would love this stuff.
It is different, right? Like, because it doesn't have the fat content.
Right.
Because you can't, because it's like meant like these the brand that I get it from is like they're like preppers, right? Like they're like, you can store this in your closet for 10 years and 15 years, and like, when you're hiding in your bunker. And I'm like, yeah, but what if I like destroy one of them every 2 months?
just house this peanut butter powder.
Yeah. And like the thing that I love about it is that I have always been like big peanut butter all the time eater. Yeah. Like the only thing weird about Ted Lasso with him like scooping the peanut butter is he uses his finger, not a spoon.
Yeah, that's I didn't understand that part.
Yeah, distressing. But with a spoon, yeah. And so this is just like that, but I can eat half a thing of peanut butter.
Yeah.
And instead of costing like $5, it's like, okay, that was 7 cents.
Wow.
because like you just rehydrate it
Yeah.
with some milk.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a baker, and I'm already sort of imagining like the interesting things you could do with peanut butter powder in baking and stuff like that as sort of
a lot of like a lot of like natural gym bros
oh yeah,
are
sure.
all about peanut powder
Yeah. I
because
get that.
it isn't like the protein powder that like feels very sciencey.
Yeah.
It's way cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
True.
is my weird little advertisement for peanut powder.
Well,
And
yeah, believe it or not, we are two role-playing game designers, but this
allegedly.
but this I just before we got started, just seeing the giant tub behind you, needing
Yeah,
to know more. And so I'm
yeah,
glad
yeah.
we got to talk a little bit more about the peanut butter powder.
Oh my gosh.
So when we were, when I knew that I was talking with you today, I don't
Yeah.
like to I don't prep questions or anything
No,
like that, but I sometimes I
I
like
prepped nothing.
perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
The only person that's ever prepped anything is Will Yobst, who came with questions for me, which was absolutely delightful. I was like, all right, great.
That is like when I was watching that episode and I was like, that is one of the most baller moves I've
Yeah,
seen in the tabletop space. I loved that. Like that was that was amazing.
it was
An
wonderful.
incredible moment. I was like, Will's changing the game.
Yeah, it's
And then
great.
I was like looking and going like, and I'm like 4 weeks out from not. I'm 4 weeks out from talking about dry scooping peanut powder
Please do
into your
not
mouth.
set a
That's
precedent here, Will. Do
Will.
not.
You gotta slow down. You gotta slow down. We can't keep up.
But
Uh,
whenever I think about you and talking about games with you, there are two things that come to my mind
yeah.
immediately.
Okay.
And one is PbtA games, and
Love them.
specifically for me, combat in them, and my big
Okay.
struggle with them.
Okay.
And I know
Yeah.
this is something that you and I have like
We've
alluded to
talked about
talking
yeah.
about, yeah, of like how
Oh my
you
gosh,
like.
is it gonna be now?
I think this would be a good time for you to help sort of like illuminate me on how it works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing. And then the other thing is we have fallen in love with the idea of the live RPG together, the
Yeah.
living RPG.
Mhm.
And just yesterday, I was at my parents' place, and I somehow got into the space of explaining a living RPG to my
Mhm.
parents, and they thought it was
Oh
they
my
seemed
gosh.
to they seemed to understand it and think it was really cool.
Yeah.
So, and they're not role playing people, but they understood the concept. And so
Yeah.
like in talking with them about that and like the work I've been doing on Dusk and things, I'm like really back in
It's
love with the
there.
idea.
It's
It's
there.
like
It's
very
something.
much in my head.
Mhm.
Um so those are the two things that I always think about when I think about talking with you. Do we have
Yeah.
to talk about them? No, we can talk about whatever. But those are the
I'd
things that
I'd
I
be
was
happy
like,
to. I love both
I
those things.
gotta, I gotta. At some point in time, I need you to explain to me how PbtA games work with combat.
Yeah. Uh,
I want to start with that because,
yeah. I was gonna say that I like that is a thing tons and tons of people struggle with.
mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, I don't think it is actually as complicated as people are making it.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me set this. Let me set some precedent here,
please,
or like
please.
some context for this. So when I started playing role playing games, I started with PbtA games. Those were the first role playing
Oh,
games
no
that I
kidding.
ran.
Yeah,
So I've always been a GM. I've never like from the
yeah.
beginning. I didn't like get introduced to the hobby by having somebody else run it for me.
Likewise.
I had been watching early AP shows
Okay.
that were around at the time, years and years ago, and they were playing D&D, but then like there were like these allusions to these other things, this mysterious other
Yeah.
thing, and it was pretty much PbtA was what they were talking about. And
When Vincent and McGay Baker invented the second RPG,
the second one, right? Exactly. And knowing that I was going to be sitting down playing with Chicago improvisers who are like top tier comedic talent and like unbelievably snappy and good at making shit up on the fly. I knew D&D wasn't going to be a good fit. Also, it didn't appeal to me anyways. Because also I was watching like not 5e streams, but like 3.5
3.5
streams. I was
streams.
like, this fucking sucks. I don't know why
Excuse me,
people are.
3.5 is a perfect game.
Yeah. So like I was like, okay, I'm gonna run PbtA games with these people. And the first thing I actually ran was not even an official game. I
Okay.
I bought Dungeon World because I knew I
Okay.
wanted to eventually do something with fantasy, but
Yeah.
my friends, these improvisers, are also mega Star Wars nerds. So what I effectively did is I made a
Okay.
Star Wars hack of Dungeon World where I
That's a
like remapped a lot of the existing classes and just reframed a lot and changed a few things into some like Star Warsy type
yeah.
characters. And then we played that. That was how we
That
got
is so
started.
funny.
And then
That
we
is
played Dungeon World after that.
that that is extremely funny because it represents simultaneously um playing PbtA in a way that cuts away all of its strengths and playing PbtA in a way that is just the direct line of how every PbtA designer does it.
Yeah.
Like
Sounds about
you did
right.
you did 0 to PbtA designer in like a day.
That sounds about right.
with
Uh,
all love,
yeah,
obviously.
no, of course, yeah.
Yeah, no.
So that's
And people
that's my
should break the rules. People
context.
should hack games. People should like go wild with how to doing stuff, reskin, rechange everything, whatever, you know.
Right.
But that is so funny because that's just so direct.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
like we played the game and everything that was outside of combat flowed
worked. Yeah,
wonderfully, easy,
yeah.
no problem at all. And then once we got into fighting anything, that's where it became tricky. And like so
Stopped working.
this
Yeah,
was with the improvisers and so they already like don't want something very structured. They like
yeah,
something loose. But like I also then suddenly didn't have something that had enough structure for them to understand
yeah.
because they're also big video game nerds. So that's the other thing is like when I brought this and I brought Dungeon
Yeah.
World to my other group, my grad school friends that were playing,
Like,
they're
oh,
all
we get
huge
this.
video game nerds who
We played a
expect
Baldur's Gate.
right, and they're
Yeah,
like they want something. They wanted some sort of mech. They were fine with being virtually ruleless when we weren't
yeah.
in combat, but once we got into combat, they're like, I don't understand.
I don't know. Yeah.
So
And have
help.
you played combat in other PbtA games?
No, so
Okay. Okay.
I've only played Dungeon World and my weird
Yes.
Star Wars hack that I
Yeah.
did.
Star Wars World.
Star Wars World,
Yeah,
which
that's what you name it. You name it Star Wars World.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, no, it's 2024 now. You have to come up with your own name for it.
yeah, shit.
Yeah, it's not immediately post Forge.
Right.
You got to actually name this game. Yeah.
And it's got to be four. Well, it's Star. Star is the name of it because it's got to be 4 letters.
Or Wars.
It could just be Wars.
Could be Wars.
Anyway, so that's sort of the context in which I played PbtA game. And so like
Okay.
again, the improv thing was how I got started, but we
Yeah.
didn't play for very long. The grad
Yeah.
school friends, I played Dungeon World with them for 2 years.
Yeah, and it still doesn't work.
It still doesn't work.
Yeah.
And yet we still just kind of like because we were just making shit up anyways when
Yeah.
and the game thrived when we were outside of combat and we were just truly
Yeah.
exploring the world and just they were just talking to people and things like that. Like that all generally
Worked.
functioned.
Yeah.
But it was once we got into any kind of combat, it was like, all right, this is where we start to the wheels start to fall off the car. All right, so that's a lot of preamble and context for you.
It's extremely useful. It's extremely helpful because there is the separation between how Dungeon World does combat and how most other PbtA does combat.
Okay. So
There is like a huge difference between those two things. And like a lot of people criticize Dungeon World. Like, let me quickly do like the disclaimer, like, Adam Coble had very bad behavior, etc. I also played Dungeon World for years. I was a huge Dungeon World forum player.
Oh, okay.
And so like I wasn't in the Dungeon World forum. I needed a place to roleplay that wasn't attached to my name because I had a little while that I was so stressed out by the micro celebrity that I had gained that like I couldn't play in a normal way online, but I wanted to play online. And so like, it just like was a way for me to go like no one is expecting Brandon Leon-Gambetta of Pasión de las Pasiones to play a dungeon game, right?
Right.
Like, so like,
That
there's
can
like a little
happen.
bit of separation and reclaim some old love, but still having the PbtA.
Yeah.
Um, and what there are things in that game that work really well, and there are things in that game that miss the mark
Mm,
because it's trying to do what Dungeons and Dragons does instead of trying to emulate the feelings of what Dungeons and Dragons does.
I see.
So like uh HP as like a thing that goes down
Yeah.
is like a thing that D&D does.
Right.
But that's not the thing that's cool about D&D. And so
It's
like
not.
it's not.
Oh
It's
God.
not. And like there's an article I don't remember where it is, but the 16 HP dragon
Yeah.
that explains really really well how to like manage that part of the combat.
Right.
But fundamentally, I don't think PbtA is especially good at that kind of combat.
Mm,
Um, because you're constantly making the consequences and like the changes in the environment until you're doing damage. And so you have like almost like a choice. Do I want to do damage and move us towards the end of this combat? Or do I want to do the thing that PbtA is good at, which is setting up
mm,
and changing consequences? And so what I actually ended up doing in my forum play is I hacked the game. I
aha.
essentially ripped out HP
Okay.
for player characters. And I said to the player characters, like, listen, I'm not gonna attack your HP. Like, period. These we're a team that is like, we're playing in these forum games, so it's taking a long time. No one wants to die in this forum game. And so we're just not gonna have death unless it's like really, really set up. It's
Okay.
narratively interesting, and it's like the place that this is obviously going. We're not gonna worry about HP. You're
Okay.
big heroes, and there's gonna be consequences. And so like there would be things like, oh, you're fighting this guy, and then like, yeah, he bites your hand off. And so like instead of saying like, oh, you take 4 damage, I look at my little set of moves that I've made for the monster. I'm like, yeah, bite off a limb is one of them.
Yeah.
And so just do it, and then the players would react, and then you've got the thing going back and forth again. And so instead of doing like, uh oh, change scenario, change scenario, change scenario, things change, do 4 damage. It just stays within that same
Right.
conversational flow. And that is how a lot of more modern PbtA games set it up.
Okay.
I don't want to say that Masks is like the gold standard for combat. It's just the combat I'm most familiar with.
Yeah,
That's
I know
Masks
you've.
from
I've.
Magpie Games, Brendan
Yeah.
Conway. And I love it. That wasn't a diss on it. That was just me going like, I don't want people to think I only look at Masks, but like that combat style has been emulated by a lot of follow-up games
Okay.
that you have conditions, which is in Pasiones as well. And when you're in combat, you are trying to basically check off like 2 to 4 check marks on the opponent.
Mm,
Basically get 2 to 4 things to happen to affect the opponent.
yeah.
Uh, and the player has like 1 to 5 check marks to check off before they're like kind of like in a bad place. Like they get a bad consequence,
Right.
whether that's like being killed, being knocked out, lose control of their powers, whatever. And it's set up explicitly so that when you make an opponent mark a condition, they immediately make a specific type of move. And so they
Mm,
have like a list of like 4 moves that are extremely thematic kind of things. And so like you're like, oh yeah, I do this, I do the punching thing, like I get up close, I whack him, I got a 10 plus, everything's awesome, yeah. And then it's like, all right, well he's got the move, destroy a city block. And you
ah.
go, and so he destroys the city block. And then it's like that just moved the thing along because then you have the new scenario.
Right.
The problem in Dungeon World and the problem in most combat games in tabletop space is that turn to turn, nothing changes.
Right.
And so, like in Dungeon World, it's a PbtA game. Its strength is setting up new scenarios, not necessarily resolving those scenarios. PbtA doesn't resolve scenarios well; it makes scenarios well. Um, but it moves from making scenarios to doing damage and having 3, 4 like turns in a row maybe nothing has changed. People
Right.
have just lost some HP. And like a, a truly great dungeon world GM will make sure that isn't the case.
Yeah, I see.
But like the rules don't give you enough for it, because the rules are trying to do what D&D does instead of emulating what D&D does. And so like if I were writing Dungeon World, it would be the kind of thing where combat's like way shrunk down. That like you've got like big cool abilities,
Yeah.
but it's like, oh, when you get hit by a monster, you're dying,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, because that's the big moment, right? You've got the players like going through like, you're slaying the whole army, you're doing the whole thing, blah 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 blah, and then it's like, and then the paladin stood at the pass and went like, run. There's too many, and that's the moment that the game should focus on if it's a PbtA game, because that's the dramatic change moment.
Right.
So those dramatic change moments are how you make a combat good. And so like where I have slowed down, it's like, the mechanics can give help, but the mechanics don't do it automatically, obviously. But like that's where I've messed up in Masks combat, which I'm very adept at running, where I've gone like, okay, you knocked out one of his conditions, and he kind of like does like a blast at you. That's nothing changed.
Right.
As opposed to like you hit him and cameras turn on all around the city, showing your home address, like, showing your home, and you can see like your mom and dad hanging out in the kitchen, and like then something changed.
Right.
And so that's how you run combat in PbtA, is you don't think about how do I damage them. Damage is like, I literally have no ideas left of what to do. Or you damage and also make a consequence.
Right.
Or also make a change. Like, if you're in Dungeon World, I slice it, like, the baddie kicks you and you take 4 damage, and also you're careening off a cliff towards lava.
Right.
Then we've got a thing happening, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. It's just everything has to have a real move behind it. The HP in all of these games is like so ancillary. Like,
Yeah.
like even like Apocalypse World, right? In Apocalypse World, you've got the harm track that like fills up, and like it can fill up quickly because you don't have a lot of health, and like, there's not great armor or anything like
Right.
that. But you're supposed to follow the fiction, and way more often than being killed by running out of harm, you'll be killed because someone got the drop on you, put their gun to your head, and you're
Right.
done. And it's just like, yeah, no, you're done, right? Because that's what the fiction demands. And so, and that is also how players interact with NPCs in
Yeah.
combat. Is like, you can go and brawl it out, but it's not about like doing harm. It's about looking at what the consequences of those things are.
Yeah. This is so fascinating, and I think, knowing who I ran these
Yeah.
games with, I feel like the improvisers, if I had known to run it like the way that you're describing, I feel
You would
like
have killed it, I'm
they would
sure.
have loved it.
Yeah.
Like, and I
Yeah.
think today I could do it because I have, having listened to you explain the intent behind it and how it sort of flows, and getting these sort of concrete examples with masks and stuff like that. I get what you're describing is like inadvertently a lot of things that I ended up kind of like trying to do with like Lumen and some of my recent stuff, by like having
Yeah.
the GM turn where there's like a weird twist that gets added to the scene, because you're exactly right. Nothing changes if it's just our HPs are going down and it's a race to see
Yeah.
whose HP goes away. Or like I've been going healthless with a lot of my stuff, so that like
Yeah.
it's not about dwindling away the HP. It's about this boss has these defenses to them, and you have to find
Mhm.
ways to overcome them. And once you've done that, they are defeated.
Yeah.
And so I feel like today I'm in a space where I completely understand what you're describing to me. And
Yeah.
Spencer of the past, I feel like would have really
Might have done the same.
might have and
Yeah.
might have. I truly think those improvisers would have really thrived in that,
Yeah.
because they were so good at just kind of going with the flow and making up, and they would add their
Yeah.
own consequences to the situation because they like a challenge, right? They didn't
Yeah.
like things to go their way. They wanted things to not go their way. So they would have like loved this. I am kind of thinking though, like I'm curious. It's impossible to say now. The other group though, who are
Yeah.
my grad school friends who had they were not improvisers, but their background was they were video game players, and I
Yeah.
wonder how they would have. I can't say if they would have done well or not well or anything
Mhm.
like that, but like they came from a space of in video
This
games
we're in
you can
combat now.
see the health bar,
Yeah,
and I'm
the little
seeing
UI
the
comes up.
health bar go
Mhm.
away, and like I wonder how they would have done, and all I can do is just sort of
It's
do a
conjecture,
thought
right?
experiment about it of just like how they would have done. And I think then what I'm sort of realizing then is like the folks who struggle with PbtA combat, like
Mhm.
I had in the past, I feel like I no longer struggle with it. I feel like I've graduated out of it thanks to you. Are coming
And
from a very either trad game space or from a space like
yeah,
a video game space where you're just this is how it works. Is I it's truly a race to see who can get that red bar this
yeah.
big to this big as fast as possible.
I think so. And there's also like PbtA is the most run game maybe ignoring D&D. D&D is like, impossible to compare anything to. PbtA is, in my opinion, the least read indie game, and while being the least read, most played indie game, right? Like the amount of people that
Yeah,
have played a PbtA game or run a PbtA game
yeah,
and haven't read the book is huge.
yeah.
And like that isn't an insult on them. Like, PbtA is set up, and the way it's set up, it makes it look like you can just grab these, grab a playbook for each player, grab some basic moves, and just run.
Right.
And you can, but like the way that I like to the way Brendan Conway said this to me one time, that there's things that void the warranty. That like if you read the book and you follow the directions in the book, you're gonna have a basically good time that basically does the genre, basically does the story, basically does the thing you're emulating, right?
Right.
When you start to deviate from that, you void the warranty.
Mm,
And it might work, it might not. And hopefully the mechanics are strong enough that it will still work. But like uh people hack, like, take like D&D and go like, oh yeah, this can play hard sci-fi.
right.
And in PbtA, I think the designers aren't trying to make that promise. They're instead saying, if you follow these, you'll have this cool experience.
Right.
And a lot of people don't read the book, and like that's totally fine. But the book usually will explain, like, here's how these different things work. Like
Right.
Dungeon World monsters do have moves on them.
Right.
And I think that Dungeon World doesn't do a good job of telling you to use those moves, like,
Yeah, I think
always.
that was one of my biggest struggles.
It's kind of, it just kind of like has them listed there as like, and monsters have moves. But higher up on the stat block is monsters do d6 damage.
Right.
Monsters do 2d10 damage, where 2d10 means roll two d10s and pick the higher of them.
Right.
And so like if you focused it in and said like they do these scary things to the players, then it works. And like Monster of the Week has like a similar sort of issue that you can set it like you're supposed to go and like find out what the thing is that will take out the monster, and like set it all up, but like you're gonna probably end up in combat before then, and like you've got your kick some ass move and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna use my kick some ass move, and it's like, okay, and then that happens and it's like, yeah, but as the GM you shouldn't be letting that happen yet. They don't know how to handle the monster. And like the book lays it out, the books lay it out a little bit more, but if you just grab the play materials, it won't work.
Interesting.
And so like one of the big challenges is designing in a way that the book contains everything and the play materials contain enough that you can do it. And so like people do tricks to try to get people to like read the book. Like in Pasión de las Pasiones, it was a really for 1,000 reasons, it was a really conscious choice to separate out the moves so that you have one question from your playbook and two questions from the basic move. And part of that was so that so that the characters would do things in different ways, and that was very important to me. Another part of that is that if someone tells me, yeah, I'm running this game, and like I'm trying to solve my character's question, but I can't figure out how to solve my character's question, and it's right up there at the very top of the sheet. Like, is that just like vibes? Then I'm like, okay, so you haven't read the book. This is how it works. And then like, read the book, and then you can like get that information. But like I think that is something that has developed over like I guess 12 years now. Apocalypse World I think was a 2010. Dungeon World I think was 2012. So like it was like right after.
Right after, yeah.
Monster of the Week also was like right after. And so you can see kind of like some of these like ancestral lines between the different games. And like if you look at like I'm very familiar with the Magpie games, obviously, as I published with Magpie. Urban Shadows First Edition is a thick book.
Right.
Like it's like twice as thick as all the rest of their games. And that's because it includes an enormous amount of information on how to build a PbtA game. It's 2 books. It is Urban Shadows First Edition, and like this is the Magpie method on how to write moves. This is the Magpie method on how to like build scenarios. And so like that was actually my first PbtA game.
Oh, okay.
And so like kind of like and I ran it first without reading the book. And
as we all
know, everybody does. Yeah. Tons of people have told me that they run Passion all the time and that someday they're gonna buy it. and I go like, hey, I'm super glad that you're running Passion all the time. When you buy it, I'll get a little money, so I appreciate that too. It's gonna be a slightly different game once you read it. But like I think better. I think improved.
Right. Yeah.
But like all of these things, like they all these play cultures all build on each other, right? I'm fascinated by those like games ancestries, as like, and especially because like many of the designers that have like these big pivotal moment games are still designing, right. Especially within the PbtA space, because it's such a new area of design. Yeah.
I mean, this has been extremely enlightening for me as someone who's just, again, like I ran PbtA games and everything flowed except for the combat. And now it makes sense why, for a couple of reasons. One, in that I picked a game that didn't lean into the PbtA stuff the way that it maybe should. And I think just in general, where I'm at now and sort of what you're describing with things like masks and stuff like that, like the healthless, like take away the HP thing, and now suddenly the game makes sense to me. Suddenly the entire ethos of PbtA clicks. The second we take away the one thing that is trying to connect it to what everybody else is used to doing, and I think is diametrically opposed to how this is supposed to work. It just suddenly makes sense to me now.
To me, that also like once you release that, it takes off like the handcuff that stops you from being a GM that reaches for the heart. And like this is the thing that I hear all the time, and like I've joked about all the time. Like people all say that I'm like a super mean GM. And like one of our mottos for Protean City Comics was the next episode will be a happy one. Because I would constantly make promises that like this is gonna turn out okay. This is gonna because I love telenovela. Like like I do want things to turn out okay. But you gotta go through the hard stuff. And like when you're playing a game that doesn't have those like HPs and stuff like that, you can say like you can just reach for the heart much more. Like you can just say to the player, like, because once you don't have the HP, because the HP the HP is a representation of the golden box.
Mhm.
Do you know what the golden box in RPGs? What that concept is?
No, I'm not.
It's an older one, and like given that you started on PbtA, you might not be familiar. It was like big during like I think like the 3.5, 3.0, 3.5 D&D days. That what is on the player's sheet is within the golden box of protection, and if you touch those things, you're a jerk. And like if you want to touch those things, first you need to take out their HP. You gotta,
Oh, I see.
So like de-leveling is like a part of D&D, but like that breaks the golden box.
Yeah,
Taking someone's equipment breaks the golden box.
I see.
And so once you separate yourself out away from HP, it lets you like, with consent from your players, with an understanding with your players, just fully break that golden box, like like I've played in like one shots where like someone was like trying, like someone was like, we're trying to like we're doing a one shot, we know it's not going anywhere, and like there's like a player that's like, yeah, like I've got like some like machine things, and like my character kind of like doesn't like, my character like doesn't really know where they came from, but like because they're the bull, they're Wolverine, right? And then like in the middle of the session, like I just go like yeah, and so like they rolled like a 6-. They've rolled a couple things are in a bad place, and so I'm like, yeah, it's like so she reaches into your chest, just like hand into the chest, and just pulls out your motor, and just like holds it aloft, and it's like, my motor? It's like, yeah. She pulls it because like you don't know where you came from,
Right.
like so she pulls out your motor, and like you can feel your system starting to shut down. And there's like an alarm going in your head now, like a full like metallic alarm going, and like you can't do that in D&D.
Right.
It totally breaks the golden box. That's not okay.
Right.
That's not fair. And like that player could have X-carded me, right?
Sure.
And like it would have been like very, and like we like sometimes we play with X cards. Sometimes we have like, we always have conversation ahead of time of like we're friends sitting around a table. The best safety tool is having open conversation with each other. Open conversation with each other, open safe conversation with each other is a better safety tool than the X card by hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
And it isn't always possible, but that is the best safety tool. And so like, but like that was a great moment, and the players loved it.
Yeah,
and like, of course, because it's so cool. Because suddenly it's like, oh, I'm a robot, and I have been a robot, and all of these memories that I think are human memories, all these emotions that I think are human memories, are just programs.
Right.
And like, that's so cool, and you can't do that if you don't break the golden box.
I'm just thinking from
and HP is just a shield.
Yeah. And like I'm even just thinking as like a designer, right? Not even as somebody who's like running or playing these things, but like there's only so many ways you can write a move or a power or ability or whatever word you want to call it that deals X amount of harm to X number of enemies in X number. Like there's, and so if you are so focused on, if HP is the lifeblood, then you inevitably are going to be writing moves and powers and whatnot that are in that space of how do I attack this thing.
Exactly.
And if you shake off HP, you now, like, as a designer, I can see and I can imagine, and I'm starting to play with it with my healthless games where it's like,
I'm pumped about that.
I just don't need to write powers or talents or tactics or whatever word I'm going to use for it. Like, I don't need to write them as deals 3 harm to a close enemy anymore. Like, it could just be like, blast off a sonic boom from your body, and it's like, oh, cool. So like you can do that, and now we look at the defenses of this boss, and one of them is like, is unshakable or whatever, and you're like, actually my sonic, I'm gonna activate the sonic boom because I can only do it once at combat, and it just like, it shakes the boss. We suddenly have ticked that box or something, and like,
and that's so fun.
That's infinitely more fun than like, okay, they've got 5 armor that we got to get through. Who's got the armor? Who has enough damage to get through that? And then, okay, now how do we? Fuck. That's so good. Like, now, like, I suddenly understand why it's good.
and like I could run. I love masks. And like I could run masks combat just daily. Like I would just hop. If I could be paid to like if I could run like the salary I need and everything like that by hopping online and like just run in masks combats with like small amounts of downtime. Like that was one of the negative reviews we got all the time for for Protean City.
Oh,
Is like,
really?
hey, Brandon doesn't let these people rest. Like
It's
Brandon
nonstop.
specifically, like other GMs, they do a great job balancing it. We love it. We get the downtime. It's amazing. Brandon will not give these people a second of rest in space.
Right.
Like how are we supposed to get two characters kissing if they don't have like even a moment of space? And it's like, have you guys not read a comic book? Like, yes, the world's shattering around you.
You
Kiss
can
them
still
now.
smooch.
You can
Yeah,
still
right?
smooch.
Now is the time, if
That's
ever there was
dumb.
a time.
And there's no turns. There's no HP.
Right.
And so, like, in the same way that it gives the GM permission to reach into someone's heart and pull out a metal piece, you also have the permission to, like, grab onto your friend and go, like, and we get, like, a vignette right here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because in the middle of, like, a D&D combat, you're, like, or, like, a Dungeon World combat that you've got HPs that you're all keeping track of, you're moving numbers around, everything like that, everything needs to be spot perfect. You can't go, like, hey, we need to talk about what happened last night.
Mm-hmm.
Because then everyone's lost concentration, everyone's lost focus,
Right.
and presumably HP is going up or down all around you.
Right.
But like if you're in like this floating kind of space, then it's like, yeah, of course our characters are still fighting the evil robots. We're just at the same time having a conversation about what happened last night.
Right.
And that's what comic books are, because comic books are soap opera, right? And so like that to me is where PbtA most hits. And Apocalypse World, I think, is the same thing, but with combat that is just so quick and brutal and horrible.
Right.
And so like it's all downtime until someone goes like, no.
Right.
And then you see where people stand and you give it, and it's like, dice roll. That guy's dead. That guy's dead. And
Right.
now we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating to me having listened to you sort of talk about this and sort of explain it, like how I have inadvertently come back to this space almost accidentally. Like I just feel like in the stuff that I am designing, I am as if the stuff had just kind of crept into my mind somehow through like osmosis from just being exposed to PbtA ideas, but never actually executing them correctly. Like this idea, many of these concepts are like in my head and starting to come out, where I feel like the stuff that I'm making now is in this space of like a weird blend of PbtA concepts and player skill, OSR, foundations, and still a little bit of that trad stuff with like how combat is formulated, just because that I like my systems and stuff like that.
Of course,
but like,
fun.
it's all just kind of coming together now. Like there's the light bulb is blinding me in my mind right now as I'm like starting to understand this space more.
And like all games are just games. Like there is no real difference between OSR, PbtA, any of those things, you know?
Right.
And like I have been a perpetrator of making it seem like there's a bigger divide. I've gotten into Twitter beefs that made it seem like there was like huge divides. We're talking about games here. We're talking about like no one is going like, hey, I like Gin Rummy, I like Monopoly. We fundamentally cannot understand each other.
We must fight
now. We must fight. We must fight. The fact that you don't enjoy Scrabble is extremely problematic.
Right.
Like in no other place in any hobby sphere is that happening, as far as I can tell. You know, like probably in some hobby spheres, knitting probably, you know, just like there's some random one, some random one that but like we lose so much knowledge by not ingesting the design of other people. And like Dungeon World is such a fascinating one because it tries to bridge two things that if it didn't try to bridge it, I think it would work better.
Yeah.
The moves, like the moves in Dungeon World that are combat focused are good moves. And if you made a trad game with those, it would work really well. The non-trad moves, the non-trad mechanics in Dungeon World work really well. And if you took out the trad stuff, it would work. It would be a PbtA. It would be a standard PbtA game that works really, really well. Does its thing. But then you end up in a weird space that you've got one character who's like, I can, when I look into water, I can see like the reflection of where I'm going to be 3 days from now. And you have another character that's like, yeah, the main thing that I do is I roll the ranged combat attack, which is like the worst move in the game by far. If you had a ranged combat person, like if you've got a ranged combat person in Dungeon World, it makes the experience worse. And because it's just a bad move. Like because it fictionally most of the time aims nowhere. You either put yourself in a bad spot, which like fictionally can be tough to do, and just like kind of means like, okay, now you don't get to fight anymore. You take like you give like just a tiny bit of damage, or you do damage and you lose ammo. And like none of those are actually fun in a PbtA sense. Like put yourself in a bad spot is, I guess, but like
the best of the three, and even then,
it's the best of the three. It's so much. Yeah, nothing. There's no meat on it. So yeah, that is.
Holy shit! This has been like so. I mean,
oh my god, we took the whole time on this. I'm so sorry.
I don't mind that at all. This is the most enlightening coffee break I've had in a long time. I feel like I've truly learned some shit that I'm gonna like carry with me for a very long time.
There
like,
is a
go ahead.
There's a I have to tell you this because I'm like excited. I want to talk about it. I have been wanting to write a fantasy PbtA game for a while, and I've like circled around it a couple of times. And I think what I'm gonna do is write a romantasy PbtA game. And with that, I'm gonna be aiming to like hit those combat notes and just like really make it like very PbtA, very like take the masks kind of concept and like keep dragging on that. Take what like Hearts of Wulin is doing and like keep pulling on that and like take some of these like more combat centric games and like really hit that really hard so that you can have like frequent combat that resolves quickly, changes everybody's emotional state, changes all the situations, and then you can go back to like, having some of the romantasy stuff. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the idea. I know we're running out of time, but I want to just put this out into the world. You mentioned the idea of like wanting to run. If you could be paid to run mass combat. Here's what I genuinely think, Brandon, is that like I think people like me, designers like me, and there's lots of us who just they struggle with this, they don't get it, they maybe want to know more, or love PbtA but are just fundamentally missing the mark with this thing, could benefit from a service that you run of some kind that is like, I will teach you a crash course on how this is supposed to work. I'm not going to teach you all the other aspects of it, but
Clash course.
Oh my god, what are we doing here? It's like I genuinely think if you wrote something or ran something or something like that, it would be so valuable. If we could just take this video and then you sell it to people and be like,
this is a new course.
This is it. Let me just watch me explain it to Spencer and it will make sense to you too. Because he probably thinks the same way you do, and this will help.
I'll become like one of those like TikTok influencers, like holding up like something that isn't a mic and going like, running combat in PbtA is easy. Come check out my course.
Exactly. Truly, I think like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, like Aaron is saying, like your masterclass on PbtA, that's it. That's your next idea, right? This is perfect. We started and ended with two brilliant ideas: the audio notes RPG on itch and the masterclass on PbtA.
That's the kind of heat we get.
I mean, truly, we didn't miss this episode. This one was perfect.
Great. That's great.
But I know.
But we should at some point, like, I know I've said this 100 times. Like, we should at some point get together. We should at some point get together and play a Masks combat.
Yeah, I would love to.
Masks is so easy to make a character in, like, because it's superheroes.
Yeah.
And
Gen Con?
I'm not going to Gen Con
Okay.
this year.
Maybe
Just
we
couldn't
we'll
make
do
it
it
happen.
over breakfast.
But yeah.
We'll do it soon then.
We could because I used to do a thing that I would hop online, like anytime I could randomly hop online, I would hop online. I would say like, hey, who's around?
Yeah.
And so I ran Dungeon World for a while, and then I swapped over to Masks, and we'd just go like, all right, here's the baddie in the city. This is the thing that's going on.
Right.
Let's go. Let's roll some dice, and roll some dice. Have a combat, change some things around the world,
Yeah.
and end it. You know,
I would
not
love
for
to do
recordings,
that.
for anything.
I want to. I'm gonna when I come back. I'm gonna take you up with it. I'm gonna reach
Yeah,
out and then
schedule.
like get
Because like
you, me, and Mike on the computer because I think Mike would be really good at it.
Sure.
And would understand the
Yeah.
concepts here.
And
Because he's again going back to the idea of he's an improviser and a theater person. Like he would get it, and then I would not get it, and so all three of us coming together it would work.
and like you can do it in like an hour.
Yeah,
you know, like make characters and run a combat that's like really, really satisfying
Done.
in like an hour. Easy.
We'll make
Easy.
it happen.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, we can even record it, and we'll write down like my GM. Like I'll put down like because I'll do the GM stuff that I would do in preparation for the combat live too.
Perfect.
Because we can do that in an hour.
Done.
PbtA is easy.
All right.
RTFM. Read the fucking manual. And check out that podcast. Maybe, I think it's my favorite podcast. It really, I love that podcast so much.
Well, this was great. I know you've got
I do need to jet,
out.
unfortunately.
Yeah, so let's get ourselves into the wrap up here. So
yeah,
where can folks, if you want to be found online, where could they find you and or your stuff? Like your master class that you're building right now after this.
I'm not really on social media very much these days. I've been I Twitter, moving away from Twitter was really good for me, and it made me realize that I didn't really want to do that. And so there is a Stop Hack and Roll Discord at tinyurl.com/SHR Discord, and Stop Hack and Roll is my game design podcast. I also have a website that's in bad need of updating, but I'm thinking I might try to update it this week. That's BrandonLeon-Gambetta.com. And I'm theoretically BLeon-Gambetta on Twitter, but I don't post there anymore. And I'm theoretically BLG on Blue Sky, but I don't even remember what the name of that thing is. So clearly I'm not on there very often either. But yeah, my game is Pasión de las Pasiones. And I'm working also on like a little games collection called Radcrawl, which B. Leon Gambetta.
So we gotta have it. I gotta have you because we didn't get to touch it.
We didn't get to talk about
that
that all.
Stuff or the live stuff, which I think is like our other major.
That's our other
Venn diagram.
Yeah, soon. I would love to. And it's been such a pleasure being on, man. I really, truly enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
This was great for me. This was really great. Hopefully this was great for folks watching this either live or in the video afterwards. Like I said, this is the last coffee break for a while. I'm going on vacation. We'll bring back season 3 or whatever it is sometime later. I have no announcements for that. Maybe season 3 is just me and Brandon sitting down every week trying to figure this shit out.
It'd be fun.
All right, folks. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.